The first season of Inside Job was a breath of fresh air when it came to adult animated comedies. It was legitimately funny, it didn't have to use cutaway gags and middle school level jokes as its only source of humor, had animation better than some of the competition's stale, lifeless animation, had a much more interesting premise than the constant family sitcoms that we have been getting sick of for years, and had characters that I actually cared for and didn't want to beat the shit out of for being pricks most of the time.
Dad! What is it? What's going on? I heard a noise. Is somebody downstairs?
So of course I was anxious as all hell for this show to get a second season. However, with Netflix not exactly treating their animation department with that much love and care, yeah, fuck them for that by the way, I feared that this show wouldn't get that second season. But lo and behold, Netflix actually did something not stupid and gave us Inside Job Season 2. And I'm happy to report that it's just as good as the first season, with some areas of the show being improved here. Although, there are a couple of things that are troubling to say the least, but we'll get into that eventually, because right now, I want to talk about the animation. I somewhat touched on this in my last review, where I mentioned how the art style looked kinda like another Rick and Morty clone at face value, but legitimately had better animation than those Rick and Morty or Family Guy clones. Well, it seems as though it's been slightly improved here. It may not be as noticeable as some other second seasons in animated shows, but I would say that the animation looks a little bit smoother, maybe not as choppy or something, I don't know how to explain it. And there are a couple of moments here and there that are definitely showing off some of that smoothness, though they are very few and far between and you do have to be looking for them. And certain episodes show that the animation team had a much bigger budget to work with, since there's a lot more insane shenanigans going on than what happened last time. Another criticism I had was the reference humor and how there was a little bit too much of it throughout the whole show, and could sometimes get in the way of certain moments.
Look at me. Look at me. I'm the captain now.
Yeah, like this shit! Well, it's still here, but not as prevalent as before, and honestly, I'd say those kinds of jokes hit a little harder now since there's so few of them. And even then, some are pretty damn funny, and a little more than just a face value comment, like this one for instance.
Hi, Sasquatch.
I feel like no one even cares who I am anymore. I saw this kid in the woods the other day, and he goes, "Hey mom, it's Chewbacca." Fucking Chewbacca? He's not even real.
Who the hell are you? Chewbacca?
God damn it.
Which, if you don't look more into it, it's just another funny reference humor kind of thing. But then, if you skip to the Halloween party in episode 6, you'll see...
Oh, okay. I see what you did there.
Which is great attention to detail and adds to an otherwise forgettable piece of dialogue. The comedy in general this time around leans more on clever comebacks and situational jokes, which is much better since it fits with the show way more than the jokes that make people go,
I know what that is!
However, the best thing that the season does is up the ante, having insane scenarios like there being a fake hell beneath the Vatican, magic mushroom people, celebrities secretly being a vampire cult. It's that kind of stuff that is absolutely hilarious to me and where the show exceeds the most. Like, the world building with these kinds of plots are great and still tie into real life. Like, the show uses Bohemian Grove as a Burning Man festival for all the secret societies to gather at and basically just act like a frat house. Although I'll touch more on this aspect later, I still enjoyed the characters here. Reagan is still a great main character that's still relatable, still funny, and still borderline psychotic, but we get to see the more caring and nice side of her once she's in a good relationship with someone else that actually cares for her and also understands all the crazy shit going on, which was a pretty nice change of pace for her character and overall the show. Brett is as lovable as ever, getting more character development with a whole episode almost dedicated entirely to him. Plus, the finale sets up some interesting stuff that may play a big factor into the next season for him, so I'm looking forward to it. But seriously though, he's just still so lovable.
Brett, how did you somehow legalize and unionize sex work?
I couldn't help it. The solution just seems so obvious.
Rand gets way more of the spotlight this time around and was pretty great to watch, from him being way more smug when he's in charge of Cognito, while getting some nice development towards the end, which was a nice way to give his character more depth than just,
But I've never been on a date before.
You'll be in my body and women find me irresistible. I'm gonna go eat a hot dog on the toilet.
The newcomer Stadler was also a neat addition to the cast. acting as the straight man to all of the insane antics going on in the show, and as an inside look into someone who actually regrets the stuff they've done for secret organizations and doesn't treat it like a desk job. Plus, his chemistry with Reagan was a really good change of pace for everything, and was really sweet to see. Basically being something nice and wholesome surrounded by chaos and cynicism. And then all the other characters here were really just a mixed bag of good and bad, which is where I'll start getting into how this season does have its fair share of issues that unfortunately keep it from being a 100% improvement from the first season. Not to say that season 2 is worse than the first or overall bad, but just troubled somewhat. Like I said, the rest of the characters besides the main ones are not exactly amazing. I mentioned in my season 1 video how they were all just specific tropes, which wasn't necessarily a bad thing, but more could have been done with them. I actually like a lot of them more individually now, and kind of accept them for being who they are. I mean, I still like JR here, though I do believe he was underutilized for the most part and only had a couple of good scenes, and also really didn't fit in with everyone else since the show didn't really make that much of an attempt to show him coming back into the office since he was supposed to be gone for probably a few months when nobody had seen him since the first season. It was kind of jarring. But luckily, I do think all of their individual jokes are a little bit stronger than their jokes in season 1. Maybe it's just because I'm more positive though. Except for Mike, who I'm slowly starting to dislike, since he just kind of comes off as nothing more than a huge cynical asshole for 90% of the time. I mean, there's a whole episode where he treats the main cast like garbage and by the end doesn't learn to be a better friend. I mean, Rand may be a cynical asshole as well, but at least he shows more character traits besides that negativity in ego. He has
Layers!
And this all ties in with the ending, which I am not that enthusiastic about. I can't really say that it's necessarily bad, but I can say that it's somewhat messy and or underwhelming. However, this episode exemplifies 2 issues during the whole finale that take away from the overall season. A, this massive apocalypse-causing weapon had no buildup or was hinted to at all, and it just showed up out of the blue. Yeah, it's weird and strange that this possible universe-ending machine had no reference at all to it during seasons 1 or 2. And something this massive not having anything to help ground the stakes honestly felt jarring. Like it almost was as if the writers had just come up with this really cool idea and they didn't have enough time to actually put it into the story, so then they just rushed it into there without trying to plant little seeds in order to give the watchers an idea of what was going to happen. And it really doesn't help since this plays a part in the rest of the finale when that happens. And B, the second and probably biggest issue that blankets the overall season in general, this episode makes the friend group besides Brett selfish jerks. During the timeline-changing shenanigans, it turns out that pretty much everyone else besides Reagan gets positive alternate timelines. She just kept that as a secret from them so that they wouldn't get distracted from the main mission of saving, I guess, the regular timeline that they're in, and they all got pissed at her for it. And so, left during the height of the situation, and then only came back in the end because Rand was still changing the timeline and making their outcomes worse. So pretty much if their lives remained as good as they wanted, they would have been fine in abandoning each other, Reagan, and stopping the world from being destroyed probably. Oh, and the icing on the cake is the fact that this was a similar thing that happened in season 1, where everyone pretty much unjustly turned on Reagan. These events make it difficult to see the main cast as friends, honestly. I mean, hell, even the show brings attention to the fact that the team doesn't have Reagan's back.
They might flake out on the mission and start pursuing their own side plots.
They wouldn't when the fate of the world is at... The fate of the world is at stake!
So dramatic.
The fate of the world is at stake!
You want me to do that about
Hey, can you hold on? I'm getting another call.
And yeah, maybe you can make the excuse that these are meant to be fun jokes more than anything else, but at the same time, they've bailed on her at the most important points in both seasons. So when they bail out on Reagan again and only come back to help because their good lives started to go to shit, it really makes you question more and more how they're all still friends and makes any genuine moments they have with each other feel artificial. Then the final episode focuses on 2 different plots going on at the same time. The first involves the aftermath of Project Reboot, in which some anomalies, or plot holes as the show refers to them, are scattered around the world and need to be taken care of before they cause permanent damage to the timeline. And Brett is put in charge of the team. While in the second plot, Reagan has to decide between going with Stantler and creating a new life with him, or staying with Cognito and working even closer with the Robes. The problem with the finale here is that it's split into two different stories that have no relation to each other and both feel a little rushed. Surprisingly, the Anomalies plot is pretty damn short and is neatly wrapped up by the end of the season, since the team is able to handle all plot holes except for one off screen, which is really underwhelming since we don't even get to see what some of them were, like not even a montage or something. And the final one we do have to deal with is funny, but tonally dissonant with the much more personal and important plot following Reagan and her life choices. Here, Reagan is asked by Statler to join him in running away from the shadow governments and living peacefully away from all of that, while at the same time is being brought more into the fold by the Robes and basically offered to work side by side with them. And although Reagan seems like she's going with Statler, by the end she chooses the Robes since she doesn't see any timeline where they're both together and happy and getting what they want together. On one hand, I like how this is a powerful moment for Reagan, giving up on the person that she's grown so close to for their own happiness while sacrificing her own happiness for that. But on the other hand, this takes away a new character that I didn't think got enough screen time and was a good shakeup for the whole show in general. So even though Reagan is in charge of Cognito as a whole, for the most part she's still going to go on missions with the team like usual, she's going to get caught up with her work to an unhealthy amount like in season 1, and we were going to find out who the Robes were no matter what, so it wouldn't have mattered if she was or wasn't with Statler by the end. But really, I wish that the finale had a bigger build-up and had a better plot, since half of the one here feels like any other episode, while the other feels like something that needed more time in the oven in order to feel more impactful. But to wrap up my thoughts on Season 2, I'd call it just more of the same. It still has solid writing, good jokes, and builds more on the premise. But I do think that the issues here do hinder some of my enjoyment of this season, but not to the point where I dislike it. I still enjoy most of the characters and absolutely love the insane hijinks they go on. So with that, Inside Job Season 2 for me gets a 7 out of 10. Hopefully the things set up by the finale can play big factors into Season 3 and provide great comedy and surprises for the story. None of the issues may have been deal breakers for me, but the show needs to work a lot on the characters here, and instead of writing off new ones, should instead use them more often and effectively going forward. But with the good writing and solid animation here, I have no doubt that whatever comes next will either be as good or even better than what we have here.